Hey, welcome to Own Your Future podcast, where we help you own your future. Today, I have a good friend of mine, Danyl Collings. He's a an appraiser, a business owner, and investor. And today, we're going to talk a little bit about appraisals and what goes into uh, determining the market value of your house when you're getting a mortgage. Daniel, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Thank you so much, Eric, for having me. So, my name is Danyl Collings. I own Four Core Valuations. We are a team of 7 licensed appraiser professionals. We provide residential only valuation services, and we can do anything from vacant land, which is a report in my inbox I have to look at, to a single, to a multi. 1 to 4, basically, is what they say, is what we do.
Great, great. And so tell a little people about what kind of goes into an appraisal or the background so that they can kind of maybe understand the appraisal process before we get into more detailed conversation.
Sure. So, the simple way to look at it, well, I'll give you 2 items. One is look at the appraiser as the eyes and ears of the bank. So, the appraiser is an independent licensed professional that has been hired in that particular situation to determine that the price that the buyer is willing to pay is supported by the market value and data of other sales. The second part is it's all based on substitution. So, I laugh, Eric. Sometimes I pull up and people say, "What do you think?" And I say, well, if you really want to know, I'll charge you an exorbitant amount of money. I'll go into my car for 30 minutes and I'll give you a valuation like a range. I could do that, but there's so many things that goes into it, highest and best use, zoning, um, functional utility, condition, neighborhood, location. So we are looking at all those things. We're rating your property, which is page 1 of the report. And then the comps is basically, this is what I think is similar to your house, and here's how I came up with the valuation.
So one of the things that I run into a lot is, I shouldn't say a lot, but a lot of realtors that I deal with, maybe they don't like the appraiser, and just in general, not you specifically. Everybody loves you, but maybe they don't like the appraisers in general. And I'll give you an example. I recently had a deal. It was up in New Hampshire, and the person was buying the property for, I think it was like 420 or something like that, and the appraisal came in at 419. So what do you so like, I just feel like nobody is really ever that good to be if you're at 419, you're at 420. What are your thoughts on a situation like that?
That's a great question and example, Eric. I took a class probably 2 years ago by a great teacher by the MBREA, Mass Board of Real Estate Appraisers, great organization. And the teacher was saying basically, we're not that good. And we talked about this. And, if there's a sale in that report that brackets, which is higher, that sold higher than the 420, in my opinion, it's worth 420 because the appraiser is basically saying they've looked at these 3, 4 sales and that the buyer won't pay any more, or the property's not worth any more than 419. Where if you have sales higher, it doesn't make sense in my opinion. To me, that's you're just, I don't know, you're thinking too hard. Sometimes in every business, I'm sure we all know friends, colleagues, coworkers, they overthink things. That's overthinking it, in my opinion.
So let me ask you this then. When I look at an appraisal, I see a lot of adjustments. I'm sure when some other people look at their appraisal, they just see numbers. When you do have a property, let's say you're buying yours for 450, and you're buying, but there's a property in the neighborhood that sold for 490. How do you make the adjustments or figure out what a property is worth when one property sold for 490, another property sold for 450, another property sold for 475? How do you guys figure out the differences between the property and how that equates to value?
Great question. So a couple things, and I'll see if I can hit on all of them. So the first one is that 490 sale, is it comparable? And if it's comparable, as in if my subject is a 3-bed, 1-bath, 1,000 square foot house, and that sale is a 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,500 square foot house, that might not be a good comp because there's a reason why that buyer paid more for the extra bathroom, for the extra square footage. So first, we want to determine where our job is to find something that can be substituted with the subject. So think of it as, the most similar property. That's one. Two is adjustments. In my opinion, if there's a lot of data, you should have very little adjustments. When you have a lot of adjustments, you're basically saying that there's very little data. Your question is so timely because before the call, we got an order for a field review in Cohasset, not too far from certain people. And it's a $2.1 million sale. And the report was done in June of this year. And this client wants us to review it. So we quality control and review everyone else. And that appraiser did a very good job just in glancing because she had a lot of adjustments, but she only had 8 sales to look through. So that when you have limited data, you should have a lot of adjustments versus if someone has a ton of data and they have a lot of adjustments, it doesn't make sense in my opinion. And that's one of the things we look for when we do quality control on each other.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually have a question. So I recently, like within the last year or so, or maybe a year and a half now, I renovated my condo.
Mm-hmm.
I have a renter in there now. Redid the kitchen, redid the floors, painted, etc. And I'm sure a lot of people and owners have. So what type of renovations do you think probably add more value to a house when you're doing an appraisal than other renovations? So like, if somebody's dumping money into their property, where is a good place to dump that money into their property?
Sure. I mean, I think the old adage still stands of kitchens and bathrooms, I think, are where the money's spent. When you think about it, let's take ourselves in the mindset of a buyer. So you have a kitchen, bathroom, floors and everything are refinished. You could probably repaint the place. And, your roof is older, but your roof's not leaking. Most people are going to just kind of wait a little bit until the roof really needs repair or replacement. If a heating system's older, most people are going to say, you know what, I'll stock away money and wait till the heating system either gives me issues or is really old. But kitchens and baths, when you walk in from day one, that's what you're using. And it's kind of hard to change those things unless you are going to buy the place and do more renovations. So that still is where your bang and buck is because that's where people use the most.
Interesting. Yeah, I would say so. People love my kitchen. You're actually an investor too. So when you're renovating your properties, is that what you're mainly focusing on, or when you're buying these properties and flipping them, what are you doing?
You will see the same things that we look at in the rental market. For example, I have a 1-bedroom on the market for rent. I'm only asking $1,400. I have 30 applications in my inbox. Could I go up on the rent? I could. But the main thing that people like about this unit is it was built in 2016. Beautiful kitchen, beautiful bathroom, and that's what captivates them. Everyone who walks in says, it's tiny, but it's in great condition. And that's how I'm able to get maybe more rent for a really small unit of 525 square feet. So even in the rental market, people will pay more for nicer things.
Absolutely. So what's on a lot of people's minds lately is the crazy market that we're in and how things have changed. So, I wanted to kind of pick your brain on, how you felt like the COVID market with the multiple offers, things flying off in a weekend, how that affected your business, I guess in a broad spectrum kind of way.
Sure.
And then how it's changed now that interest rates are up and have appraisal values or comps changed. So I don't know if you can give me like a kind of like an overview of like what it was like in 2020, 2021 and how it is now and
Sure.
how it's changed.
Sure. Well, it's funny, Eric. I come into houses and when multiple offers were being presented, everyone's like, your job is so hard. I said, hard? I'm getting paid great money and I'm doing the same job. It's no different. The only difference is, and I equate it like this. Actually, I was in Weymouth probably a couple of weeks ago, and this is a 3-bed, 1-bath, 1,000 square foot ranch near 18. and the new bridge and the train. And the guy says, I have multiple offers. And I always tell everyone, you can have multiple offers. Let's say that one's selling for 400. You have multiple offers. You could have multiple at 350 and one at 4. So multiple offers, it's hard to really gauge. It tells me interest, but when the market's crazy, everyone's getting multiple offers. If I pulled into a situation they weren't getting multiple offers, I would say, what's wrong with this place? So, it's still the number you take. I've seen multiple offers, Eric, and it's an FHA and the property's in rough condition and it's not going to pass. And I'm thinking in my head, multiple offers didn't mean anything. You still, you're taking an offer that requires additional scrutiny by me to make sure that it meets FHA guidelines. So that's how I view multiple offers. And I think business-wise, business was always good. It got really good after COVID. I call it like overdrive. And now, yeah, we are very, very slow. We're probably running at about 60% of our capacity. But the good news is that we do many things. We do divorce appraisals. We do probate appraisals, new construction, review. So I think being diversified can insulate you from not all the slowdown, but it'll temper it a bit.
So let me ask you this: like when things were going crazy, if you looked at a property, 6 months before, now 6 months later, it might have a different value. Can you explain to people how the market maybe affected that time change, or like how the time kind of can sometimes affect value? So how a value can somehow be significantly different 6 months later?
Sure. So you think about it like this, and that's a good question. An appraisal is kind of like a picture. It's like a snapshot in time of that day. That day I'm going in and all my data is based on that day and what sold recently. When you're in a very fast moving market, to me, what's very valuable in every market, but even more valuable, is what sold recently, because that gives you the most accurate indication of what's going on with the market. I try not to go back unless, if you're in a market that's more stable, you could extend back a bit. So understanding your market, knowing what you can do. Maybe you want to go out a little bit, look at competing neighborhoods as opposed to going back. So again, most reliable data. And I've done an appraisal, I think, where I did it, and then I went back a couple months because the rates changed and their house was worth more. Because again, on that snapshot day of the second inspection, I'm looking to see what's new, and they were able to get a bump in value. So it's always the effective date of the appraisal is what we go by. If you wanted a valuation on your condo before you did the renovation, I could do that. If you wanted one tomorrow, it's all about that date, because that tells us what data we're using.
Yeah. So that being said, like now in this market right now, even though things have slowed down, there's still like there's still limited listings. And so there's still a supply and demand. There's just less buyers, but there's still a supply issue. So me personally, I've noticed that values are still somewhat robust and strong. What have you noticed anything with the changing in the market and interest rates? Have you noticed anything with values and pricing and whatnot?
I think value is adjusting in some areas. I think so. To me, a market can be different sections of town. It could be a neighborhood. A market is always changing. And if you look at, for example, it could be a neighborhood that people wanted to get into, and now the softening, it allows them to even get into there. So you really have to look at every market independently. Everyone wants to take, what the newspaper says, and the newspaper says everything's 10%, 10% is a reduction. No, I am seeing things closer to list price. I am seeing things that went under agreement, came back on price adjustment, and then go under agreement. I am seeing more listings, but they're still moving. You're right. I think they are. So it's not at the point where we have an oversupply. I think we might be closer to some sort of health, as opposed to when things are flying off and, I'll waive my home inspection, which, a person's own risk. That's their choice of what they want to do.
Yeah.
But I think buyers are more picky, and they have a right to be. Sellers have driven the bus for a while, and now the buyer's the one who could determine a little bit more, has more time. So we've seen this market before. I purchased my first real estate condominium in 2007, and everyone thought I was nuts because it's coming down, and I sold it at a very good number, made money, and then I bought a house when I sold that one, and so it's all about, I think, just kind of understanding your affordability, and also are you at the top of a range, the middle of a range, the bottom of a range? Where do you feel? The Weymouth one a couple of weeks ago, that was an entry level house at 400,000, and I think my value was higher than the 400,000, so the buyer's getting a good deal. So it's every property fits in a different place. Your condo could be at the top of the market, the middle, the bottom. That's how I think people should look at it. Where am I?
Yeah, it's funny. I see that it's actually a very healthy market between sellers and buyers. I noticed that when things are priced right, the property goes quicker. And then when the sellers have unrealistic expectations and they overprice, the property sits. And that's where I've noticed that I've told most of my buyers, I'm like, look for the properties that have been sitting for 2, 3, 4 weeks, because the seller in that circumstances is coming to a realization that their expectations are wrong. And but when I've still seen properties that are listed right, they go in a weekend or they go in a week.
Yes.
And it really has to do with what I think is probably the pricing strategy of where you list your property at. And some sellers just haven't come to a realization that their expectations are too high.
Yeah, if I can add something to that, I think a good real estate professional is very helpful. And I think, sellers have to understand that, imagine you're a seller and you're this house down the street, which is a shack falling apart, sells for this number. And then, your place is about the same. And then you want what that number was, but you couldn't get it. That we're seeing a lot of that. People have to readjust their expectations based on where we are.
One other thing I wanted to ask you, and it kind of veering off topic a little bit here, is I wanted to ask, so one of the big things that happened, and we had it before COVID, but it came into kind of like on a more regular basis during COVID, is we got a lot of appraisal waivers. About that, where Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac says, hey, we're happy with the value, you don't need to get an appraisal. I wanted to get your opinion. What are your thoughts on the appraisal waivers? Because as a loan officer, I freaking love it when I get an appraisal waiver, because it's just one less thing that I got to deal with. So, but I figured I'd like to get your opinion on that since I like it so much.
Sure. I think there's a time and a place for everything. Even if everyone did an appraisal, I can't do them all. There's not that we don't have that much man and woman power to get to them all. But, my opinion is Fannie and Freddie are making a calculated risk based on data. And I think a lot of people aren't aware that Fannie has a system called collateral underwriter. And they require the appraiser to write in a format called the Uniform Appraisal Data Set. So basically, if I was appraising your condominium and I called it C3, which is average to good condition, now they have data on your condominium. So if you went to sell it or refi, they have some recent data and they could say, you know what, we have a good understanding of the property. We're okay with it based on the buyer and their finance position. Yeah. So I tell everyone an appraisal is a tool that a lender uses to determine risk with the collateral, which is the property. So if they have a good understanding from their database, they feel like the risk is very low and they say, you know what, we can do a waiver on this one. Cool. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so I was going to get your opinion on, because you just talked a bunch about Fannie and Freddie, but you also do FHA appraisals.
Sure.
And so like a lot of realtors, they're afraid of FHA because of the minimum property standards. I actually don't think they're that bad in the most part, and you can usually plan for them up front. but what is your opinion, or what are your thoughts on the FHA appraisal versus Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and whether or not somebody should be concerned about an FHA appraisal?
I told a real estate professional this, and I guess I'll say it here, but I think FHA and becoming an expert in understanding FHA is a way for someone to differentiate their sales practice from someone else. So imagine if you could say, I'm also an effort, and I'm also a expert in FHA appraisals, and I could tell you about what they're going to be looking for. That's a differentiator, because there's a ton of real estate agents out there. So, to answer your question, FHA is not much off of the conventional. Yes, they have peeling paint, and they want us to get in the attic and make sure there's no leaking and testing systems and everything like that. But if you have a really good agent who understands it, most of the time I come in, there's no issue. A lot of the things I see, railings on stairs, safety issue, are usually easily remedied. And I think it won't be an issue so much, Eric, in this market, because now people are going to say, I really want to move my house. I don't have a million offers where someone's not FHA and I can just go there. So it's a great program. And, it's the same thing as VA. I think they get a very bad rap, but these are great programs that people are trying to use to get a piece of the American dream. And, I think people should have a little compassion, put themselves in that position and say, what, if it was me, I could work a little bit here.
Awesome. Great tips. So, before we can kind of conclude our conversation, I wanted to ask you, if you had any tips for sellers and realtors prior to the appraiser coming to the house and reviewing the property. And what I've noticed, at least with my experiences, is that, appraisers' personalities are very diverse. Mm-hmm. And where one appraiser may like your input, another appraiser might tell you to pound sand. And so, do you have any tips that sellers or realtors could use prior to you or somebody else showing up for the appraisal appointment?
Sure. So I'll give you two, and I'm sure a third will come to my mind. The first one is, I had a real estate agent that I've known a couple of years who was listing a property in Avon. We're familiar with the project. It's a newer development, probably built in 2019. And there's not a lot of sales in Avon of newer construction. So he wanted my opinion. And so he hired us to do an appraisal. And we gave him our opinion. And they ended up selling higher for a cash deal. But at least they had some sort of understanding of how an independent appraiser looked at it. And the seller was very appreciative of that. So that's one way to use, something that they could use. Another one is I was referred by a mutual friend that we know to another agent who did an appraisal in Hingham. And they asked us to take a look at this report and do a review on it. And we did a review on it, and we agreed that there's not really many issues with the report, and so they felt good moving along with that buyer. So that's two things you could do. If you get an appraisal that you don't like, we could do a review from our desk right here. We could go out and do what's called a field review, and we could tell you whether we like it, whether we don't. We do it for clients. We could do it for anybody. I think the third thing is just understanding what drives value. Be careful of over improving. I've been in a new development in Canton, and the guy says he spent, this is 2020. And he says after he bought it, he spent 60 grand. And I go in, the unit's nice. But built-in bookshelves, that's a tough one. That's a tough one, because I'm basically looking for another sale that has built-in bookshelves. I'm not going to find that. So it's hard for me to quantify certain things when they're so granular on the granular level. So, I just tell people, be smart about it. Have a good layout, good flow. If you have 5 bedrooms, you should have at least 2 bathrooms, things, but a real estate professional should be able to tell you, 5 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, that might be a little tough, functional utility problem there. So just, having a good understanding of your property, it's tough because, all of us are biased, even me on my own stuff, where you bring someone in to give you just an independent view of it. And we're as independent as we can get. You pay us a small fee and we tell you where, we're not like a real estate agent trying to say, you'll get this or that. And, some are better than the others. So we're independent and we tell you good news or bad news.
Awesome. Just don't give me 419 when I'm buying it for 420. I would really appreciate that. That was very frustrating for me.
It's funny. That's come up in class.
Oh man.
I can look at it and tell you, yeah, they should win 420, but it's
Well, I tried to rebut the appraisal, and so my in-house appraiser viewed it, and he was actually pretty upset about it, and we were trying to rebut it, and then the appraisal management company came back to us and says that we're on the verge of violating, what is it called, AIRS, the
appraiser independence.
Yeah. So we're like, yeah, it was crazy. Hey, so thanks for taking time today and telling and showing people and giving them an idea of what it's like to be an appraiser. I mean, you're more than just an appraiser. You're a business owner and investor as well. If people wanted to get in touch with you and ask you questions about, how to get an appraisal or what they need for an appraisal, or maybe even like, hey, I got a property that needs somebody to fix and flip. How would somebody get in touch with you?
Sure. So you can actually just put my name into a web browser, www.danyolcollings.com as it's spelled and shown, and that'll take you to our appraisal website. You can order an appraisal there. You can pay for one. There's actually a site developed by me, which is pretty scary. But and if you have a property, I mean, the thing is, we don't mix the businesses. So, I'm looking right now for buy and hold so I can leave some gifts to my 2 darling children and my wife. So, it's the strategy is more buy and hold, but, we'll still look at a rehab project if it's a good one. So as you know, I'm building a very big house, so I got to get that done before anything else. So.
Thank you, my friend. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to Own Your Future podcast, where we help you own your future. Thank you.